Yawning. Right now, reading that word, some of you already felt the pull at the back of your jaw. And here's a small promise. Before this video ends, you will almost certainly yawn at least once. But when it happens, it will not mean you were bored. It will not mean I lost you. It will be a reflex firing, a switch flipped somewhere below your awareness, and you will barely notice you did it. So think of this less as a video and more as an experiment, and you are the subject. I am going to describe yawning, show you yawning, maybe let you hear a yawn, and your own brain is going to give you away. Because a yawn is one of the strangest little things your body does. It spreads from person to person like a rumor, and nobody fully agrees on why. That is the curious part we are chasing. But before we chase why it spreads, it is worth slowing down the thing itself, because a yawn is not one action. It is a tiny sequence of them, fired off in a fixed order, over and over, exactly the same way. It starts with a long, slow pull of air. Not a normal breath, a much deeper one, dragging your lungs wide open. Your jaw drops to its full extension, stretching muscles you never think about, opening your mouth further than almost anything else you do. As that happens, your eyes squeeze shut, often watering a little. And here is the part almost nobody notices about their own yawn. Deep inside each ear, a tiny muscle tenses and stretches your eardrums taut. That is why the world can go briefly muffled mid-yawn. It sounds dulling for a second, as if someone turned a dial down. Your ears are being pulled tight from the inside, all part of the same reflex, none of it something you chose. Then it releases. The long inhale reverses into a slower exhale. The jaw eases back, the eyes reopen, the ears relax. The whole thing empties out as smoothly as it filled. And just like that, it is over. And the timing is oddly consistent. Start to finish, a yawn tends to run about 6 seconds, roughly the same in you as in a stranger across the room. A reflex this fixed, this identical between people, is exactly the kind of thing that begs a why. That whole 6-second sequence can fire for 2 completely different reasons, and telling them apart is the key to everything that follows. One kind starts inside you. The other starts inside someone else. The first kind is the spontaneous yawn. You are tired, or bored, or wound up with stress, and the reflex rises on its own, no one else in the room. Your body decides it is time, and out it comes. That kind we mostly understand. It tracks with sleepiness, with dull afternoons, with nerves before something big. It is a private signal from your own nervous system, and it needs no audience at all. The second kind is stranger. You are not tired. You are not bored. Then you see someone else yawn, or hear one, or even read the word, and the same reflex fires in you like a light switched on from across the room. This is the contagious yawn, and it is the one worth chasing. Nothing inside your body asked for it. Something outside you triggered it. So the real question is simple. Why on earth would another person's yawn reach across the air and pull one out of you? So if that copying kind is the real puzzle, you would think the plain kind, the tired yawn, the bored yawn, would be simple. Ask almost anyone why they yawn, and you get the same confident answer. The story goes like this. You get sleepy, your body needs a hit of oxygen, so you gulp a big breath to reload the tank and perk yourself back up. Clean, mechanical, satisfying. It feels obviously true. The trouble is that when researchers actually tested it, the oxygen story fell apart. If yawning were about topping up on air, then breathing extra oxygen should make you yawn less, and stale air should make you yawn more. It doesn't. In the experiments, breathing pure oxygen didn't quiet the yawns, and thicker, staler air didn't set them off. The one lever the theory absolutely needed to pull just wouldn't move. There's a second crack in the idea too. A single yawn lasts only around 6 seconds, one slow breath in, one out. That's a tiny sip of air, nowhere near enough to reset the oxygen in your whole bloodstream. So the comfortable answer everyone repeats turns out to be mostly folklore. Yawning is doing something real when you're tired, but pumping oxygen into a sluggish brain isn't it? Which leaves an obvious question. Then what is that big stretch actually for? So if a yawn isn't topping off your oxygen, what is that long pull of air actually doing? One of the more compelling answers isn't about your lungs at all. It's about the temperature of your brain. Your brain is a demanding little furnace. It burns a huge share of your body's energy, and everything that burns fuel throws off heat. When that heat creeps up, performance dips. The brain works best inside a narrow, cool window. In 2007, a research team, including a psychology professor at the State University of New York at Albany, proposed a striking idea. A yawn, they argued, works like a radiator. It's a way to shed heat and keep the brain cool. Here's the mechanism. That deep, jaw-cracking inhale draws a rush of cool outside air across the tissues in your face and sinuses. At the same time, the big stretch pumps warmer blood out and pulls cooler blood up toward the head. So the yawn becomes a tiny cooling event. Fresh air in, warm blood out, a quick reset for an overheating control room. Not a gulp of oxygen, but a splash of cold water on the brain, more or less. And there's a strange field observation that fits. Paratroopers have been noted to yawn in the tense moments right before they leap from the aircraft. Not sleepy, not bored, wide awake, hearts pounding and yawning anyway. Which points to something clever. A brain about to face a high-stakes, high-alert moment may run hot, and a yawn could be the pre-flight cooldown that sharpens it. Whether cooling is the full story is still debated, but it holds up far better than the oxygen idea ever did. But cooling your own brain is a solo job. It doesn't explain the strangest thing yawning does, which is leap from one person to the next. You see someone else yawn, and suddenly your own jaw wants to drop. Scientists have a name for this kind of automatic mimicry. They call it echopraxia, the involuntary copying of another person's action. Not a decision, not politeness. A reflex that runs before you even notice it starting. And that word, involuntary, is the whole point. You don't choose to catch a yawn any more than you choose to blink when something flies at your eye. The trigger is outside you, but the machinery is entirely automatic. Try to fight it, and you'll notice how little control you have. You can clamp your mouth shut, sure, but the urge still builds behind your teeth, a pressure rising on its own, from a program you never asked to run. So if this is copying, plain and simple, one brain echoing another's action without permission, then the real question changes. It's no longer why you yawn. It's how your brain even knows the other person just did. So if your body copies a yawn without asking your permission, something inside your head must be doing the copying for you. And it turns out your brain has a whole set of circuits built for exactly that. Neuroscientists have found regions that fire in a strange double way. They light up when you reach out and grab a cup. And they light up again in almost the same pattern when you simply watch someone else grab a cup. The brain barely distinguishes between doing and watching. On the inside, seeing an action and performing it run through overlapping wiring. Your motor system rehearses what other people do, quietly, without ever moving a muscle. It is a bit like humming along to a song before you realize you started. The tune goes in, and your throat answers on its own. Watching another person becomes a faint dress rehearsal for becoming them. Which is why a yawn slips through so easily. You see the wide open jaw across the room, and the very circuits that would produce that jaw stretch in you start warming up, uninvited. This mirroring machinery is not just for yawns. It is the raw hardware behind mimicry of every kind, and that raises a bigger question about who exactly your brain chooses to copy. So your brain quietly rehearses the yawn it just watched, but not every brain rehearses it equally. And that uneven catch rate turns out to be the biggest clue we have. The people most likely to catch a yawn are the people most tuned in to others. Researchers who study this keep landing on the same word: empathy. The tendency to catch a yawn tracks with how well you read and share what other people are feeling. The more attuned you are to someone, the more likely their yawn becomes yours. And it is not a vague feeling. When people catch yawns inside a scanner, the same brain regions light up that fire when we process other people, imagine their thoughts, and feel a flicker of what they feel. That is why a yawn spreads more easily between close friends than between strangers, and more easily between family than between acquaintances you barely know. The reflex rides along the same wiring we use to feel close to someone. Think of it as an invisible measure of connection. A yawn that jumps from one person to another is a tiny signal that some part of your brain has decided that person is worth mirroring in the first place. Which raises an obvious question. If catching a yawn really runs on the machinery of connecting to other people, then it should not be there from birth. It should have to grow in, right alongside our ability to read each other. So if catching a yawn runs on the same wiring you use to feel your way into another person, then it should not arrive fully formed the moment you are born. It should have to grow in. And that is exactly what researchers find. In very young children, the copy simply does not fire reliably. Show a toddler a video of people yawning, tell them a story stuffed with yawns, and mostly nothing happens. The trigger is there. The response is not. The research points to a rough turning point. Below the age of about 6, neither contagious yawning nor the story-induced kind holds up. It is patchy, unpredictable, often just absent. Then, as kids grow, it steadily strengthens. And notice what is not developing here. A 6-year-old already breathes, already gets tired, already stretches. The plumbing for a yawn was working long before. What comes online later is something else entirely. The reflex to breathe was ready at birth. The reflex to catch someone else's yawn had to wait for the social brain to mature. Which tells you this was never really about the lungs. It was about other people all along. If catching a yawn really is a social skill that switches on as we grow into other people, then a fair question follows. What happens when that machinery for reading other people works differently? Researchers went looking for exactly that. And one place the social wiring is known to develop along a different path is autism spectrum conditions, where reading and mirroring other people tends to work in its own way. So they ran the yawn test. Groups of children, some autistic and some typically developing, watched clips of other people yawning while the researchers quietly counted who caught it. The pattern that came back was consistent. Across these studies, autistic children showed a noticeably lower tendency to catch a yawn than the comparison group. The reflex fired less often when it was set off by someone else. And here is why that lines up so neatly. Autism spectrum conditions often involve a different pattern in exactly the empathy and social processing systems that seem to power a contagious yawn in the first place. It is not that anyone yawns less because they feel less. It is that the involuntary copy and mirror channel, the one this whole thing seems to ride on, is simply tuned differently. Turn that channel down, and the yawn stops spreading as easily. If a weaker link to other people means a yawn is less likely to jump to you, then the flip side is startling. That same jump happens across whole other species. You are not the only animal whose brain copies a yawn it sees. Chimpanzees do it. Watch one yawn, and a nearby chimp often yawns right back. The same involuntary echo you feel in a crowded room. Dogs do it too. So do cats, and even certain birds and reptiles. That range is a clue on its own. This reflex is not some quirk of the human mind. It shows up across the vertebrate family tree, which tells you it is old, far older than anything we invented. Here is where it gets genuinely strange. The yawn does not just spread within a species, it leaps between them. Researchers have documented dogs catching yawns from people, a signal crossing the line from one kind of animal to another entirely. And by the way, a fair number of you have already done it. That little pull at the jaw a moment ago, the deep breath you did not plan, that was the reflex, not the film. So a dog dozing at your feet can catch a yawn off you the way you catch one off a stranger. Whatever this signal is, it does not care much about the boundary between species. That is a big hint about what it is really for. So a dog can catch a yawn from a person it loves, and that little fact hands us the last piece of the puzzle, because the same thing that makes the copy jump across species also decides how easily it jumps between two people. Studies keep finding the same pattern. You catch a yawn most easily from the people closest to you. Family first, then friends, then acquaintances, and a stranger comes dead last. The signal fades the further out it travels, which tells you what this reflex is really measuring. It is a rough gauge of how tuned in you are to someone else. The more your brain quietly tracks another person, the more likely their yawn slips through and becomes yours. Now, stitch the timeline together. It is far older than we are, showing up in reptiles and birds. It skips the copying machinery in the very young, and it strengthens exactly as our social wiring matures. Put together, the strongest picture we have is this. Contagious yawning is an ancient social signal, a wordless ripple that moves through a group without anyone deciding to send it. One animal yawns, and something spreads. And you might have felt the edge of it a moment ago. I have said the word yawn more times than usual. And if your jaw twitched or your eyes started to water, that was not the writing getting dull. That was the signal, arriving right on cue. And that pull toward the people around us has probably been working on you this whole time. Because somewhere in the last 12 minutes, watching a video that keeps saying the word yawn, your jaw very likely stretched open on its own. Maybe once. Maybe twice, Maybe you caught yourself and fought it, and it came anyway. That was not boredom. That was a reflex firing exactly the way it was built to. Think about what actually happened there. A stranger you never met, recorded who knows where, opened their mouth, and your brain, without asking you, reached across all that distance and copied them. That is the curious part. You didn't decide to yawn. Your social wiring did it for you, the same ancient machinery that reads a face and mirrors it, quietly proving you were never as separate from that stranger as you felt. So tell me what everyday thing you have quietly wondered about. A price on a shelf, an object on your desk, a rule you walk past without thinking. Drop it in the comments and subscribe so the next answer finds its way to you, because there is always a reason why.